This is Things Police See, First-Hand Accounts, with your host, Steve Gould.
Welcome to the podcast that interviews active and retired police officers about their most intense, bizarre, and sometimes humorous moments on the job. I am your host, Steve Gould. Guys, thank you for joining us. Thank you for coming back and listening. Thank you for finding the show. If you're new, it's me, Old Ginger Face. And if you're watching the YouTube, you can tell what's going on with me. So I was, if you've never stood in a road in one spot in an intersection and directed traffic when it's 83 degrees out with orange hair, you should try it. It's great. You kind of reevaluate your whole life, all your choices. What am I doing? Why don't police officers make a livable wage? Why am I a slave? That type of thing. But anyways, by the end of it, you're so happy you're out, you forget about all those regrets. Guys, thank you for being here. Thank you for the 5-star reviews that keep pouring in on Apple iTunes. I know I'm on you guys all the time about it, but I truly do appreciate it. I'm not sure it really does anything with any kind of algorithm, but what it does do is it just looks good. It looks nice. When people want to come on the show, bigger guests and stuff like that will see that and be like, all right, this show's legit, and their agent will send me something to get them on. So it just makes your boy look good. So if you can do that, that's great. If you really, really love the show and you want to support, you've ripped through and listen to a bunch of episodes and you're like, I want to help Steve out, I want to support, Patreon's a place to do that. There's a patrolman, there's a sergeant, there's 2 different ranks there. You'll get both of them, you get direct access to me. I'll mail you a vinyl TPS sticker, and each tier kind of has its own things. And there's a little Patreon page you'll belong to. So it's a good time, and that's the best way to support. So if you want to do that, truly, truly appreciate it. But the show will remain free. I promise you that. The idea is that it is free and that everybody who wants to listen can. So don't worry about that if money's tight. So today's show is going to be a great one. I got a big dog here. I think this may be the highest ranking official that's ever come on here. I don't want to, make him nervous, but it might be. I have the chief deputy of Pinal County Sheriff's Department, and guy's got a hell of a resume. He's got a hell of a sheriff, America's sheriff. He's currently, like I said, chief deputy, second in command at the Pinal County Sheriff's Office. He's got 30 years in law enforcement. Assignments have included detention, patrol, narcotics, training, worked at the academy. He was on SWAT. He's done anti-smuggling, and he worked motors. And also, I don't want to fail to mention, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention he's been married 29 years and has 3 kids, which is a great feat in itself. So without further ado, let me welcome on Matthew Thomas. Sir, thank you for coming on, brother.
How you doing? Thank you for having me, man.
Oh,
yeah, the 29 years married is definitely the biggest accomplishment.
I love to see it, man, because you know what the worst part of being a young cop when you come on is like all the salty dogs being like, what marriage you on? Kind of, it's a foregone conclusion that your wife is just going to leave you.
I know, dude. And then talking to him, and again, even as a young cop, I know you've heard this, I've heard this. Yeah, I have to work 40 years, because the first wife gets this much, the second wife gets that much.
I know guys that because of child support and things like that, like we're like legit living like an apartment above somebody's 2-car garage, and they're on year like 25 of their career. I'm like, dude, that's like a nightmare. Like if you just get a straight check, it's gone, and go, well, that's why I work 80 hours a week. Perfect formula for happiness right there.
Yeah, dude. Yeah. So I wanted to break that mold, and luckily I have a wife that was a warrior through this whole thing.
That's great, man. Tell me, what's it like working at a place that really supports its police? That must be cool.
It is cool. It's cool being able to be, one of the leaders of the organization for an organization that believes in police work, and it's funny because like we say old school police work, but I feel like police work should just be police work. Like there's no old school or new school. It's just, it is what it is, but it feels good, man. And what's really nice is when you go out with the ladies and gents on the street and just run into them on calls or, T-stops or whatever, and just get to BS with them, and they act fairly normal towards you, because I see a lot of organizations where that's not the case. Because when it comes down to it, like I tell people, I'm a deputy sheriff. That's what I am. We are all deputy sheriffs other than the sheriff himself. I may hold rank within that structure, but when it comes down to it, I'm a deputy sheriff. And so we're all really the same.
That's a great attitude, man. Yeah, that kind of try to just eliminate that pucker factor, So because otherwise you wouldn't want to show up. You'd be like, if I show up, there's going to be problems because everybody's going to be like, oh, chief deputy's here.
Yeah.
Don't do something.
Right. And there's still some, they still get that a little bit, but I just tell them right off the bat, like, look, I'm not going to jack anything up. I know that that's usually what happens when stars and bars show up, that we screw up a scene. So I'm there to figure out, like, hey, do you need help? Can I fight somebody or, whatever.
Right. That's awesome. So what are they, like on the East Coast to be like a deputy chief would be called like ADC or, lieutenants LT. So would you be CD? Is that what they say? Or is there no abbreviation?
No, they just call me chief. Yeah.
Chief. Okay.
Yeah. And it's equivalent, like it's different with sheriff's offices all over the world or the nation. But it's equivalent to undersheriff for those who kind of are questioning in their mind what's a chief deputy. So chief deputy is essentially the undersheriff second in command. And then we have two deputy chiefs who one over our patrol, one over our jail, and then captains, lieutenants, and all that. And so it's kind of, it used to be back when I started, it was the undersheriff, and then it was majors, and then captains and all that below them. And so we've changed over time into this structure.
Okay. So you're the executive officer. You're kind of the right-hand man. Okay.
Right.
In Mass, the sheriffs. Hello. The sheriffs. I was in the sun for a long time, Matt. Hold against me.
It's all good, dude.
The sheriffs do mostly jails here, and which is so weird to me. Like, it doesn't make, because I've lived all over the country now, and it's like you have this other layer of law enforcement that could help, and they're like, they just do the jail. But they are starting now because of police reform and just the general like unpopularity of being a cop. They're starting to like branch out and patrol a little bit. And I think they call as far as I know, the second in command of the sheriffs is special sheriff. Which
they do. So we have some on the West Coast too that call them assistant sheriffs, special sheriffs. But typically speaking, traditionally, it's been under sheriff, and then chief deputy became a thing. And
those are way better. Special makes me think of like a reserve,
Well, it makes me think of, like you have a helmet on and you can't function by yourself.
He's here to entertain the sheriff,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I know, like Middlesex County, Sheriff Katusin, he's a good friend of mine. And so we know, the difference between our style of sheriff and their style of sheriff, because they are really responsible just for jails and serving papers. And out here, we're primary law enforcement.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, most parts of the country, they always say county is king. Like, it's kind of like all the money goes to the county. They kind of, if an area can't, man a police department, or they don't have the tax base, the sheriff comes in and helps. That's kind of the way it goes. It kind of makes sense that way. But Massachusetts is old school. I won't talk about too much because people have heard me talk about this, but it's colonial. It's very old school. Like, we still have constables at like town meetings. There's an elected constable. He's got a badge and everything, but he's just there to look over voting ballots, or I don't know. He serves some paperwork for the sheriff, some civil paperwork, So it's really, really kind of bizarre. But man, it sounds like you guys got a lot of good stuff going on out there. I wish I hope it starts to other agencies glean off of that, because there's only one way to be with police officers when you're doing a good job, and is just to stand behind them and not acquiesce to the BS in the media. Like, once you even do that a little bit, number one, the guys don't respect you. And number two, it's like they win either way. Like, if you give in, then they're like, haha, weakling, now we own you. Yeah. They don't respect you still. So why
once the camel puts its nose under the tent, man, it's all over.
Right.
And that's one of the things we understand. We know as leaders, like you did my intro, I've been in this 30 years, and 30 years I know what works and what doesn't, and what works is just good policing. We know how to do that. And all the police reform and all the perf and all that stuff, a lot of those, if you dig down and look in them, in their studies, they're basically reaffirming what we already know.
Right.
That you can't do these things, you can do these things, which we already know. A lot of it is like, you don't do illegal stuff. Well, no, duh, we're cops. And you do this legal stuff. Yeah, we're guided by case law. So typically speaking, we know what we're doing. We know how to do it. And we do a good job. And we don't, in 2020, dude, let me tell you, we felt some hate And I think that's another thing that leaders in our profession are, I don't want to say they're failing at, but I think they get a little bit of pressure and they fold to that pressure rather than standing up. And sometimes you have to understand, when you take positions like this, you're essentially taking a position saying, this is the person I am, this is the leader I am, and that may cost me my job, because if I have a disagreement with somebody that oversees my position, then I may lose that battle, but I'm going to stand up for what's right. And in my mind, policing is what's right. Like that, we are in a righteous profession and we are doing a righteous job. And, 99.9% of us are good cops doing good things.
Right.
And so we have to stand up for that and stand up to that. And sometimes that's going to hurt, man. We're going to take some punches. We're going to take some hits. But in the long run, it's what's needed.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you're right about the reform thing. It's like, well, number one, any good organization or company, corporation is going to continue to evolve regardless. And police have already done that. And a lot of stuff they just put on paper was already on paper. They just rewrote it. And it's like, yeah, we don't do that. The one thing they did in mass, which has really, really bothered me, and it was complete reaction from George Floyd incident, was they made chokeholds illegal under any circumstance. Right. So even if it's a deadly force, in a deadly force scenario, you can use a weapon of opportunity to bash somebody's head in, but you may not use a chokehold.
Right.
The way they wrote it, the way it used to be was that chokeholds were a last resort. Like if you can use your gun, you can choke. So they've always been forbidden. But now it's like, nope, not even then. You just die. It's like,
right.
What?
And it's the problem becomes this, right? Those of us who work in the real world understand that the world can be violent sometimes. And I had a major early on in my career. I mean, very early on, like I was in my first week, and he told me, son, this is a customer service industry. If our customer demands violence, then we're going to deliver it fast and hard, because that's the only way you stay safe. And so I took that with me through my career, and it's true, man. When people want to hurt us, we don't have time to dance around and mess around. We got to get to work.
Yeah, I asked that in a recent. We had a class that was going over. I'm a firearms instructor, so we had to go to this 3-day research thing, and they said that law I just told you about with the choking. He said, well, the state's attorneys, everybody's talked about it the way it's written, and they said that's not the spirit of it. We have to wait till it's been tested in court. I'm like, oh, that's the best place to test it. Is just you're on your back exhausted and you have to choke somebody because you think you're going to die. And then it's like, do I go to jail for life or not? It's like,
And who wants to be the test case, man?
Yeah, we're going to do this all on case law. Good luck. Not cool, man. Matt, can you take us back to a young deputy on the job? A younger deputy. You look great, by the way. You look at age over 30.
That's my wife.
Can you take us to your first hot call on the job, or the first call that gave you like an adrenaline dump as a young cop?
I think the first one that I can think back to that gave me an adrenaline dump would have been on FTO. So I'm out on the street, and you're with your training officer, and you're trying to do all these new tasks, and you're trying to do them right, like get in, put your seatbelt on, put it into drive, not reverse. You got to turn on lights, you can siren, all this stuff is going on, and we're headed to a domestic violence call. And so, and they tell you in the academy, you're going to die, you're going to die, you're going to die. And domestic violence calls are, a hot topic, because that's where we get hurt or killed a lot.
Sure.
So it was a DV call we're going to, and, it's fight in progress. Neighbors are calling in and like, oh my God, he's beating her to death. And so you're amped up. And at the same time, so you're getting that first adrenaline dump driving there while you have somebody next to you. Who's
someone judging you.
Everything. Yes. Judging everything you do. Like how you drive,
so
like
worst.
my FTO, dude, are you going to turn your damn blinker off? Like, bro, like I wasn't worried about the blinker. I'm worried about all this other stuff. So anyway, get to the call, and it wasn't as bad as it was made out to be. So it wasn't like an all-out brawl, more of an argument. But nonetheless, get out, and I think for me, anyways, you get out, your adrenaline's pumping.
Oh yeah, your major muscles are all jumpy.
dude, you're just like, you're sweating. You look at your FTO and they're like, dude, it's 50 degrees. And you're just, all that stuff is going on. And then you get up there and then you're like, hi. And people are like, can we help you? Yeah. Oh yeah, shit. I'm here for something.
Right.
Yes. Were you guys fighting? No. Shit. Okay. They weren't fighting. What do I do now? And,
Right.
just stumbling through that first call, man. But the adrenaline dump is what I think I definitely remember most cops do, is just all of that stuff that goes on when you're
Yeah.
especially a brand new cop and you don't know how to function in that world yet. And you have all these physiological things happening. You have all this outside influence. You have a dude next to you judging you immensely. And it makes it a very memorable experience. And then I think every time since then, as an FTO, as a sergeant, as a lieutenant, when you show up on scenes and you see the new rookie, you're like, I know exactly what you're going through, dude.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Because of that, what you're talking about, when I was newer, I liked it better when the call came in last, and when I got there, it was more. Because the ride there is where you get overjacked. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It was almost
yeah.
better if you got there and it was a little bit worse than they told you, and you're like, oh, okay. Because
Right.
you're in the moment, you're like, okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, and if it's a long ride there, you're just thinking like all the scenarios, what could happen, all that stuff. Oh,
Yeah.
man. Yeah, I remember, I've said this before, but I remember even just talking on the radio, like the phonetic
Yes.
alphabet was so stressful to me because it was like the guy's looking at you like, do you know what
Right.
letter that is? Or like, I remember he told me, he's like, just look at the license plate first, say it in your head first, and then so you're not like, boy, bravo, or, just know it.
Or your first pursuit where you're like, you're practicing this in your head and you're doing your what ifs and all this. When I get in a pursuit, I'm going to be so calm on the radio. I'm just going to, I'm going to take a breath and hey, I'm in pursuit. And then that first one happens. You're like, and you're like, oh my God, what was
What
that?
did I
Like,
do?
where did that come from? And everybody makes fun of you for probably 6 months to a year.
Yeah.
And you never
Yep.
live it down.
And those are the scariest moments too. The few times I've heard a salty guy come on and you can hear it in his voice that he's
Yeah.
pumped, and then you're like, oh, this is not good.
This is bad. Yeah.
This
yeah.
is bad. Absolutely. Yeah, man. Those were the days. So all you new recruits coming out, get ready to sweat. You better know those streets.
Oh man, and it's going to be that stinky stress sweat, man. Just stand
Yeah.
by. Your vest is going to smell so bad.
Yeah, it's different, isn't it? Different stank
It
to
is, dude.
Hell yeah.
Totally.
Matt, can you describe to us a strange or bizarre thing you've dealt with?
Oh, that's some very bizarre things happen.
I'm sure you have.
Yeah. Let me see. I think
You can go with multiple too. You don't have to pick just one. Whatever you want to do.
well, the funny one that comes to mind immediately is I always think of this one because I just remember laughing at the time, like stopping and laughing while this was taking place because it was just funny. So I'm out on a traffic stop and on the side of the road. It was my stop. I contact the two people. I have them out of the car. I'm pretty sure they got dope. Ends up they do have a little bit of dope. So I get a couple of backup guys there. One of them is a state trooper. At the time, they were highway patrolmen. Now they've changed their name to state trooper, but they do the exact same thing.
Right.
But anyways,
Is that an upgrade?
well, in their mind, yeah, because I think they wanted to be more like real cops, and so they wanted to like change the name. I'm sorry, state guys, I love you. I'm just joking. But anyways, this highway patrol guy's there with me, and one passenger sitting down, one passenger standing up, the guy, and then dispatch tells me that he has a warrant. And I'm like, okay. And so I'm kind of discounting that right now because I know we have some dope. And I'm watching the guy and I start to see, you start watching behaviors and you get real good at it. So I see what he's doing and he's about to run. Just by his behaviors, I can tell he's getting ready to run. So I'm getting ready to chase him because I already know. And it's weird because he kind of discounted me, like he wasn't paying attention to me, paying attention to him. And so I'm watching him and I'm watching him and I'm watching him and I'm watching all his body language. And boom, he takes off. And so boom, I'm right on him and I'm chasing him. And we start running away from the car. And then he does a little juke move and he jukes me a little bit and starts heading back the other way. So I start running after him. And here comes the highway patrolman out. He's running after him, and the highway patrolman is now kind of in front of me. and he's got a lead on me, and he's chasing the bad guy. And as I'm doing that, my microphone has dropped, and it's doing the swing thing where it's coming all around and smacking you in the head. And I'm trying to get control of that. And as I'm doing that, the highway patrolman goes down. And it kind of freaked me out because I didn't know exactly what caused him, but he went
Sure.
down hard. Boom, he hits the ground. And I'm like, shit. So I stop and I look at him, and he's like, I'm okay. And I look up at the dude, and the dude has run back towards me with his hands up. And he's like, I didn't do that. I didn't do that. Please don't beat my ass. And so he's giving up, and I tell him, get on your knees. And so this guy is trying to recover himself, and he just took a dump. He hit some slick gravel on the asphalt and took a dump onto the ground, and he's still recovering from that. But the bad guy, it was, what was so funny to me is he knew, like, it's all good running away and all of that, but he recognized that this cop just fell and got hurt, and now some pain was coming his way, and he didn't want no part of that. So he actually runs back to us and gives up. And I was like, man, I think that's going to be one of my new tactics. Just have one of the guys go down, and they'll come back to us.
I'm very hurt chasing you. We're very angry now. Get back. Well, it sounds like he has a heart at least. It sounds like he might have been concerned.
I think he was more concerned with himself because he felt like he had caused the injury, and now he was going to receive injuries.
Yeah. I can remember when we arrested a guy once, and he was kind of a jerk until we got in the booking room. Then he was totally calm, huge record. And he said that, I know when to stop. He said, because Boston PD once picked me up at a fight, and he said they beat the bag out of me and dropped me off at the docks. And they didn't arrest me. He said they beat me up, took me to the harbor, and left me. Just beat up. Because they probably didn't want.
It's called a beat and release.
Yeah. And he was like, it was such a bad beating that I knew if I get into it with you guys too much, it's just going to be done. It's like, well, that's a good move. You're a salty criminal.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and another one, I do have another one for you, and it just popped into my mind. So I don't know how many listeners are familiar with Arizona, but we have Native American reservations, Indian reservations. In our county alone, we have 4. And we have a lot of like drunk driving associated with that. A lot of times that you'll catch Native American going back on the res after they've been drinking and they're driving. And so I'm headed down, and this is some of the like remote areas we used to work. I'm driving down a fairly remote road, and as you can imagine how dark it is in the desert, no lights out there. So my headlights are really the only light shining down the road, and I can see like a figure. It almost looks like a Chewbacca person kind of combo.
Yeah.
And all dusty. And so as I'm getting closer, I can see that it almost looks like this person has fell out of a car, rolled into the dirt, and now got up and is walking alongside the road. So I'm as I'm driving up, I'm a little concerned, like, man, is this person all right? So I pull over and I say, hey, how you doing? And he's pretty intoxicated, and he is very dirty and dusty and has a few scrapes. And so I know something has happened, but I don't know what. And I said, you look like you've been in an accident, or, are you okay? And he's like, yeah, I'm fine, man. And I'm like, okay, well, any injuries? No injuries. And I'm like, okay. And so where are you going? So he tells me where he's going. I said, have you had anything to drink tonight? And he's like, I had a couple. And I said, a couple what?
It's always a couple.
A couple 18 packs. And I was like, what? Like, you drink a couple 18? Yeah, I drink a couple 18 packs. God, dog, and you're still walking? Wow. Well, I'm trying to. And so, yeah, that was a funny one, because he was just a funny dude. I ended up talking to him for about 10 minutes just because he was so entertaining.
Yeah, I bet. What is the I've always wanted to ask this. What is the authority, and how do the tribal lands police themselves? Do they don't they have their own constables or something? Like
they have their own police force. So that particular reservation, it's the Tohono O'odham reservation. They have their own police agency, and so we can go on tribal land in our county. We just can't arrest tribal members. So I could pull over a car on the reservation, and if it's a non-native or non-tribal member, I can give them a ticket. I could arrest them, whatever. But if it's a tribal member, then I have to call the tribal police. They have authority over the Native Americans, or the feds. The FBI also has jurisdiction out there.
Wow, that's strange. So have you ever, how does the tribal police take it pretty serious? Like, would they actually show up and take the guy, or would they take him and just let him go into the village?
No. We have a very good working relationship with all of our tribes, and even so much so that, like, if we're chasing a member from outside the reservation onto the reservation, most of our Native American tribes have agreements with us that, hey, you can chase them on here until you catch them, and then we'll take them from there. But generally speaking, yeah, if we call them and we say, hey, we have a tribal member, they did this, they'll come out and deal with it.
Wow. And how, like the one you deal with there, you mentioned, how large is that agency? How many officers?
Oh, man, I think I want to say they're about 50 officers
Oh, wow.
And they're covering about 5,000 square miles.
Oh my gosh. I thought 50
Yeah.
was a lot till I heard that. My goodness.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a big area. And
So-
they're the only tribe that actually they cross into Mexico. So their tribe goes over the international border.
Really? It gets even more complex. So
Yeah.
are they required by the state or the feds to have a certain level of training like you guys have?
Federal, yeah. So, well, that's a like a three-part answer. So the tribal police can be confined to only working the reservation that they're on. So they have tribal authority only. There's some of them that have just that. There's some of them that have tribal and state authority, so they could arrest. Their arrest powers are on the res or off the res.
Okay.
And then some of them have federal authority, so they can arrest on the res, off the res, and they can go federal with stuff. Because like the reservations here, like murder is a misdemeanor because they don't have felonies. So everything's a misdemeanor. So you would get arrested. If you got arrested for a tribal murder, it would be a misdemeanor. And then the feds come in and take that over and move it into federal court as a felony charge.
Wow, that's fascinating to me, man. So the guys that just have
great.
the local authority, they probably have no required training. They just get trained on the job.
Yeah, a lot of them, they may have their own, like the tribe may have their own
Right.
local training, but the ones that are state certified go to the academy with the rest of us. And most of the tribes do that anyways. Most of the tribes send their people through the regular academies so that they have both, authority everywhere.
That's cool. I remember when I was in SoCal, I did insurance fraud investigations for a while, and I dealt with the Pachanga tribe, and they had all their own stuff too. And like I had to go onto their land a few times, and they weren't real into cooperating with an insurance company, which I don't blame them. Who cares about insurance? Right. But I did have to investigate one of their members, and she was young. She was like 20 and going to school in San Francisco. And, when you sign insurance, if there's an SIU investigation, you have to give all your records, Right. And the investigation was over before it even started because I was looking at this as financial gain. She staged this to do this. This is what the company thought might have been. Well, she was a full member of the tribe. Her lifetime stipend was 20 G's a month.
Yep.
So I was like, yeah, there's no way this, she was driving a 2013 Kia and she staged its theft when she has 20 G's every month just piling into her bank account.
Yep.
So,
and there's a lot of those here too. And it's like the reservation. There's a couple of reservations that do very well with casinos and hotels and that kind of stuff. And those members get quite the stipend. Some of them are making like 300 and 400 G's a year just on their stipends. Yeah.
Yeah, Pachanga is kind of like that. It's like this casino, and then all around it is like really nice, kind of master laid out neighborhoods, like you'd see in SoCal, and those are people that work. They have a job at the casino, and their payment is that stipend. I just had no idea they were that big. I was like, oh my goodness, this is why go to college? What are you doing that for?
Right. Yeah.
Incredible. All right, Matt, can you tell us about your most intense or terrifying call?
Man, the most intense, there's a couple of them that were pretty intense. One of the most intense that I was on was a jail riot. And so I was on our SWAT team. I was a sergeant on our SWAT team. And so I was a team leader. And I was actually a patrol sergeant too. So I was out on the street because our SWAT team's a collateral duty team. And so we get a call. I'm out on the street, and the call comes over the radio to any units available respond to the jail for a disturbance, right? And so we start heading this way, and I was probably, I don't know, 10 or 15 minutes away from the jail. So I start hauling butt over here, and I get to the jail first, and another couple of our dudes were close behind me. But I get out of my car. So I drive into the Sally Port. I get out of my car. I get buzzed into the main door of booking. And normally booking is kind of buzzing, right? It's intake. So there's people coming in, there's people standing around, all this kind of stuff. I open the door and it is completely empty. And I'm like,
Uh-oh.
whoa. So I back up to my car and I grab my rifle and I gear up. And as I'm doing that, one of my buddies pulls up on the team and he's like, what's going on? I said, dude, put your gear on. I don't know what's going on, but it's weird. And so he puts his gear on and we go back to the door, open it up, and we're like, hello? And nobody, crickets. So what normally has detention officers, some inmates, all just dead silent. And so we start clearing through, me and him, to try and figure out what's going on. And then we hear some running. And so we kind of stop and post up. And all of a sudden a DO, almost like a movie scene, comes sliding around the corner. And he's just sweaty and stuff and like, follow me. And we're like, what the hell is going on, right?
What?
So we take off behind him and we go running. And we're running towards the elevators. And he's like, we got to go up because we have a multi-level jail. So we're like, okay, so we go in the elevator and we're going up. And of course, now we're getting amped up because we're called there for a disturbance. Nobody's where they're supposed to be. This dude is just obviously amped up and something's going on. And so he's telling us they've taken over the pod. They got a hostage. And we're like, okay, man. And so we're trying to wrap our mind around what's going on. And as we're going up, and of course the elevator's like, so the elevator's like, we're like, come on, man. As we're getting closer to our floor, you can feel and hear a crowd. And so anybody that's been to like a football game or something, you can feel it in your chest, like a rumbling crowd, right? And so I'm like, uh-oh, this is not going to be good. So door opens up, and as it opens up, some of the detention officers that were staged right outside of this pod, they all kind of turn around with that deer in the headlight look. And beyond them, all I can see is people in orange running around in the pod. The pod has kind of a fog look to it. So not completely smoky, but kind of foggy looking. So I know something's going on in there. So you've got guys in orange running around. They've got stuff covering their heads. It's smoky. It's noisy. Stuff is hitting the pod windows. And so it's a full-on riot going on in there. And initially we were told that they had a detention officer inside still. And so that kind of ups the ante. Well, as we get there, we're like, is the officer still in there? And they said, no, he's not. We got him out. And but they've got control of the pod. Like, okay. So some time goes on. We get more SWAT guys there. Our sheriff at the time actually shows up, and he got there within, I think, about 20 minutes or so. And we had them contained, but the concern is obviously they're going to do a lot of damage and they could be hurting other inmates in there. And so it's decided, like, we're going to take this pod back. And we didn't really have a plan for that at the time for SWAT. We had not trained for that. We just knew that we knew how to take stuff from people. So we were going to take back our pod. And the sheriff said,
that's freaky, man.
Oh, dude, it was crazy.
Because it doesn't matter how many guns you have. There's just two of you. They could swarm you.
At this point, we had more guys showing up. So by the time the sheriff gets there, we probably have an element of about 6 or 7 guys. So we have a 6 or 7 team or man team, and we're going to do that. We have some less lethal. So we had some 37 millimeter less lethal. We had some 12 gauge less lethal. I was on 12 gauge less lethal. Then we had some lethal coverage behind that. And so the decision is made, let's take back the pod. And so what we did was we locked down the pod next door. We went into that pod, and ours is a tiered system. So we wanted to come in from the high ground, not the low ground. So we came in from the pod next door, which has a pass-through capability. And the sheriff told he actually grabbed me and he said, "Hey, are you guys getting ready to go in?" I said, "Yeah, we are." And he looked me in the face and he says, "I want them to understand that they will never do this again." And I said, "Oh, they're going to understand who runs this place." And so on that,
Wow.
we went up and got our position, and we get ready. One of my guys goes to open the door. We had to key it open. He keys it. He tries to open it, and it won't open. And we can see that they have tied a blanket around the handle on the inside to prevent us from getting in. And so that blanket is preventing the door from opening. So one of our guys is trying to cut it with his knife, and as he is, there's shanks like coming out, and they're kind of on spears.
Jeez.
So they had taken these poles, put shanks on the end, and they're trying to spear this guy as he's trying to cut the blanket. And so he gets a final cut, and I've got a 12 gauge less lethal, so I've got it kind of high up on my shoulder because we're in very close quarters, and it's ready to go, and I'm off safe, everything right. I'm ready to roll, and the door opened faster than I anticipated because I was watching him try to cut, and I'm waiting for the final cut. Well, the final cut came quicker than I anticipated. He cuts, the door releases, and as the door opens, it just like boom swings open. And as it swings open, I look up and there's a dude right in front of me with a spear, and he spears me and he gets me right in the Kevlar helmet, and then it rides
Wow.
down my gas mask, and so it comes down. And I remember just watching it, and I'm like, what the hell did he do that for? And as that's happening, I give him one with a 12 gauge right to the sternum.
Oof.
And so we're face to face. And so he stabs me, I shoot him. And as that happens, I just remember that, of course, it's very close quarters. So again, that shot from a 12 gauge less lethal, a lot of smoke involved. So there's a puff of smoke. And as the smoke dissipates, I just remember thinking, like, where the hell did he go? Because he was just gone. Like, there was a dude there, he stabbed me, now he's gone. And so in my mind, I'm trying to figure out, where did this guy go? And as that is happening in my mind, I look up and there's another dude running at me. And so I give him one. And then we get to work because by then everything starts to go. And so
Right.
I put a shot on that guy. And then I distinctly remember my buddy next to me shooting the 37, because if you've ever had a 37 go off in your right ear, it's very, very loud, and it causes a lot of disruption in your head. So
I bet.
I shoot my second round, and then his 37 goes off, boom, and he shoots a guy across the tier that was kind of beating another dude. And we just go to work and we start clearing. And after those first couple of shots, it was weird because the inmates heard those, and the very experienced inmates immediately hit the deck. And so a lot of them start hitting the deck, and then essentially anybody standing was getting rounds, less lethal. So we were just going through and just clearing.
Damn.
And I remember it felt like it took a long time, but I got to the end of the tier, and we're like, oh my God, this is the end. Like, we've cleared everything. So then we turn around and we have to go back because there's still dudes left standing or have gotten back up. So we start clearing back. And same thing, we kind of go through less lethal people who aren't listening. And as I get to the end of the tier, I start hyperventilating, and I'm like, I can't breathe because I've got a gas mask on, and you're amped up.
Oh, I
And
bet.
so I actually just cleared my mask and took it off because it was easier to breathe gas. Oh, and there's CS going in there by now. So we have CS gas and OC gas in there. So I took off that and just breathed gas instead of trying to breathe through that mask because it was killing me. And that was the end of it. Everything settled down at that point. We had everybody either laying down or had less lethal, and they were on the ground. And then we went to just cuffing up. But it was one of the most intense calls I had been on in my career, and to that
Yeah.
point. And that was a point in my career where I had a few intense calls all in rapid succession, it seemed like.
Damn, man, that is intense. That's riveting. I can't. And then what you said at the end there with the mask on, and you're breathing like a racehorse because you're jacked up. You're
Right.
taking people out with less than lethal. That would drive me nuts too. I hate that. I hate being.
Oh, yeah. And you reminded me. So the rest of the story, because everybody's going to be like, dude, what happened to the guy? Right. Because that's what everybody
Oh, right.
was asking me. Like, what I did not see, and one of my partners saw, So where he was standing inside the door, when he speared me, right to his left was the stairway going down. So when he speared me and I shot him, it spun him and he went all the way down the stairs and was at the bottom. And
Whoa.
by the grace of God, for him, he did not die. How he didn't die, I don't know, because I gave him a straight-on sternum shot that essentially was right on his heart. And it broke his sternum, but did not explode his heart. And so he took a hell of a hit from that less lethal, and then took a hell of a hit going down those stairs. But that's why he disappeared so quick.
Wow, man. Yeah, because you probably would have been justified to blast him with a real round.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. That's why I shot that close, because I knew it was a lethal shot being that close. I mean,
right.
The standoff was maybe a foot, and but yeah, he was stabbing me with essentially a knife, and so yeah.
That's crazy, man. When you're in the jail, if you're in the jail like that and there is a riot, it must lower kind of the threshold for using force. I would imagine. I mean, I guess use of force, they're going to scrutinize it anytime.
Yeah.
But like, because once you're out open in the pod and you're blasting people to comply, they would still have to come at you, probably armed. You'd have to think they were armed to put them down lethal.
And there's a bunch that goes into it, right? Like at that point, we had given them multiple warnings over the loudspeaker: go to your cell, lock yourself in, or force is going to be used against you. So we'd given them multiple warnings. So when that door opened, honestly, it was all bets are off, and anybody standing is a combatant, and we just went to work.
Yeah. Man, I would have been on the ground fast.
Yeah, there was a couple of them that were. The funny part is this. Here's something we didn't know that we found out after the fact. We knew they had broken some of the windows to the outside yard, which are, just little slits most of the time. Well, there was some highway patrolmen on the outside. They had kind of secured the outside perimeter. And one of them says, dude, he said, we knew stuff was going to get crazy when the paper planes started coming out of the windows. And we're like, what? And he said, yeah, they were flying paper planes out saying, please don't kick our ass, we're complying. And so he said the planes were kind of floating down, and then they would come into the perimeter, and these guys are picking them up. And it's inmates sending out kites basically saying, don't beat us up, we're not doing anything wrong.
We're not part of this.
Yeah,
I don't know this guy. Damn it. And what is the punishment for, say, the people that were the guiltiest or the people who started? Is it just solitary for number?
No, they caught some state charges. Like the guy I shot, I think he ended up with 25 years extra for that whole thing.
Damn, what a fool.
Yeah. Well, they're Mexican mafia guys, so they're in it for life anyways.
Right. Yeah. You're the perfect guy to ask this question. What, if you can mind commenting on it, but what's going on with the border where you are? Like, what is
it's fine, dude. It's fine. Just watch CNN. It's all good.
That's why I'm asking. Like, what is the reality?
The reality is this: that we have drugs and bodies are the big commodities for the Mexican cartel, and no matter where you stand on immigration and all that, because it's really bad to lump it in with immigration, because immigration is one problem. This is another problem. This is an all-out, just massive human trafficking effort by the cartels. And if you dive deep into it, without getting all conspiracy theory-ish, but there's truth to this. If you deep dive into it, there are countries that want to see us all die, Americans. And they're some of the pushing factors of this. The cartels are some of the pushing factors of this. But what is happening at the border is you have a transnational criminal organization, aka Mexican cartels. They are in charge of that border. Nothing moves across that border or around that border without their permission or say so.
I heard
if it does, they kill people. And they are pushing people as a commodity. So drugs was their primary commodity. People have become the primary commodity. And so when you see, like if you look down in Texas and you see people just walking across, right? Those people are not just walking across. They have paid to cross in that area. They're paying a cartel taxes to go through that area.
I heard the cartel. I was listening to the Federalist podcast, and they had investigative reporters go to Mexico and talk to like Padre so-and-so and some other people that can kind of get away with operating down there in the cartel space. They're literally giving them numbers, and it's all through an app. So like they'll be like, all right, you paid the $3,000, your number's good, you can cross the river. And they've actually dragged people back out of the river because they were short
You haven't paid.
$200.
Yep. And they're also using like this is let me see where I'm at here. This is a memorial band, but they're using bands like this, like you would get into a I don't know, like Disneyland or whatever, right? And you wear your band saying you paid. They're doing the same type of thing where they'll give you colored bands to indicate that you have paid. So when you cross over, the guys watching on the other side from the cartel know that, okay, they've paid. And it's a genius business model for them, because if you compare it to dope, like when they smuggle dope across, let's say they smuggle a pound of fentanyl, that pound of fentanyl has to be transported and land to the person it's going to for them to receive their payment. When we're talking bodies, that's prepaid. So they're paying before they cross the border $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 a person to go over. So the cartel's getting prepayment, and then the person is crossing over. And a lot of times when they get over to the other side, the members on that side are saying, well, we know you paid over there to get across, but now to go further, you have to pay an extra, whatever, $1,000, $2,000. And specifically for females, if you can't pay that, you can work it off. And they put them into the sex trade. And same with kids. Kids are coming across, unaccompanied minors coming across, and these guys have nothing but bad intentions. So it's really a humanitarian crisis. It's a drug crisis, because they're flooding our country with fentanyl like you haven't seen before. And so it is really bad down here. I was just on a call this morning with our brothers over at Border Patrol, and they're pulling their hair out, because they're like, man, we're just doing what we can, right? And they're trying to do the best job they can. But right now they're transporting people further into the interior of our country and then just dropping them off in cities, because they don't have the capacity to keep them at the border. So their facilities are overflowing. They're overtaxed on their manpower, so they can't process them like they need to be. And so you have just thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people coming into this country unchecked. The ones that do get checked, they're basically telling them, hey, make sure you come to your court date in 4 years and let us know where you're going to be. And of course, people are like, oh yeah, no problem.
Yeah,
later.
I'll be there.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I have a friend who worked for a short time at San Luis Police Department, and then right across the border is San Luis, Mexico, and the cops in San Luis, Mexico, she would get like pictures of them in their patrol cars with just their heads gone, just blown off, and it seems like it's not possible to be a righteous policeman in Mexico, right? Because it's like as soon as you get on the job, they're like, hey, do you want your family to die, or do you want to report to the cartel? Is that it?
That's it. It's the whole, the plata or plomo, which is silver or lead. That's their methodology, man. We can pay you off, or we can kill you and your family. So either way, you're working for them. Yeah.
Oh man, what a nightmare. Well, I'm so happy you guys are down there, at least holding the line, and at least your people squared away. It's like, it's just so sad that it's so politicized that it's like you can't even you can't trust anything that you hear on the news, really. I mean, everybody says that, but it's like truly true now, where it's like especially this stuff now coming out, like the FBI investigations and how they've been weaponized. It's like, it's not even conspiracy or conjecture. It's like, okay, it's a fact. This is what the FBI did.
Yeah.
All these different things the last 5 years. And it's like, what do we do? It's just like pure corruption. That's why, I mean, I think localities are the best way to go for law enforcement.
Absolutely, man.
You know these people, you trust these people. And I'm not saying the FBI or federal agencies, there's not righteous dudes there. I know there are, because they've come on this podcast, but they're like the foot soldiers. They're out there enforcing, criminal stuff. Yeah. The guys based out of Washington, obviously, are just, are bought and paid for.
They're all part of the machine. And that's one of the big things, our sheriff and sheriffs across the country have been really pushing and making known is for their communities. Voting for your sheriff is one of the biggest votes you have, because that is essentially the head law enforcement officer for your county who is going to hold that line. And so I'll give you an example of the whole mask thing, right? No matter where you stand on it, when they were mandating things, it was the sheriffs that were standing up and saying, nope, not doing that. Right. We're not enforcing that. We're not following that. And you can't you can't make executive orders and say that's law now, because that's not how law works in America. And so truly your sheriffs are your last line of defense to hold together the paper of the Constitution.
Yeah, that's absolutely, and they're elected. They're not.
Yep.
They're not. They can't remove them easily.
Right.
It's funny you say that, because when I was lived in California for a few years, I worked at LAPD backgrounds for a couple of years, and I work with so many great cops there. And they were saying at lunch once that the feds, like I think it was the sheriff of San Bernardino County, had shot a couple people out of a helicopter. Like he still will do it. They had mounted guns on a helicopter, and he got notified by federal agency, ATF or whoever, and they said, "Hey, you can't have aircraft with guns mounted like that. You can't be taking people down." And the sheriff's response was mildly interesting. "This is my county, and I'm going to keep doing it." And guess what the feds did? Nothing. And he's still doing it.
Right. Because the good old 10th Amendment gets in the way of the feds a lot, right? Which protects our state sovereignty. And then our state constitution protects the sheriffs and a lot of the stuff that you're talking about. And my sheriff actually educated me to the fact that because former President Trump visited our county, and when he came down, the sheriff's like, that I actually, in my county, I outrank him. And I'm like, I don't know if that's like real. And he says, no, dude. And so he shows me, he says, yeah, the way it's written, the sheriff holds the ultimate authority for that county, and, holds authority over the president of the United States when in just that county. And I was like, nah, okay. So they hold a lot of power. Yeah. And, not that that's ever exercised or could be in today's modern world, but dude, our forefathers were geniuses, man. They knew where we were going to end up with when the federal government got too powerful.
Yeah, it's the last thing they wanted.
Right.
They were trying to get away from that. They were running from a king.
Exactly.
Unbelievable. Well, that was super interesting, brother. Let's switch gears here. Can you tell me about a heartwarming scenario you dealt with on the job?
Oh, heartwarming scenario.
This is the hardest one,
too, man.
Oh, good.
No, it's not, man, because there's a lot of those, dude. I think the one that hit my heart. I'm trying to think. There's a couple of them, but one of them that really hit my heart was I went on a welfare check, and it was a little old man that lived in a trailer. And those of you who have been on welfare checks will know this call. So neighbors call in and say, "Hey, we haven't seen our neighbor in a while. He's an older gentleman, lives by himself. It's been about a week since we've seen him, and we normally see him every day." So every cop out there right now, so every cop out there knows what we're going to, right? And I knew as soon as I got the radio call what I was going to. And so I was like, oh my God, this is a dead body. And so I go and, I talk to the neighbor first, and she tells me, yeah, he's almost like our grandpa. We take care of him. We talk to him. I'm like, oh man, this is horrible. So I go and I knock on the trailer door, nothing. I knock on the trailer door, nothing. And this is a small little travel trailer on probably an acre or two. And so I can't smell the smell. So I'm thinking, okay, well, I should smell him if he's dead. And he's been here for a week, and I'm not smelling any death. So I'm kind of like, all right, maybe he just went somewhere, didn't tell anybody. And then all of a sudden the door opens, and I'm like, whoa, okay, did not expect that. Door opens, and here's the little old man. And I tell him what's going on, and he's like, oh yeah, just, I've just kind of been keeping to myself. It's been a rough week, blah, blah, blah. And so I'm like, yeah, okay, no problem, man. Just checking on you. So I kind of go in, look at his living conditions, and they weren't the greatest, but they weren't the worst either. And so I was just, because he had these neighbors caring for him, I felt a little bit better. And I was like, okay, I'm going to talk to your neighbors. I'm going to head out. And he's like, well, are you going to a call or something? And I said, no. And he goes, well, could you hang out for a few minutes and just talk to me? And I'm like, yeah, sure, man.
Oh man.
And so he proceeds to tell me, how he lost his wife of like 45 years, and he had lost her about a year before, and just a sad story. No relatives, no nothing. And so I'm sitting there talking to him, and all you can envision, of course, is your grandparents, right? And so I'm
Sure.
just sitting there thinking, this is somebody's grandpa, man. And he's just sad and he's lonely. And so I sat there and I talked to him for about 10 minutes. And he breaks out some pictures, and he breaks out like a little can that he opened up, like a flat tin can. And I proceed to find out how he is a war hero because his medals are all in this can. And I'm like, oh my God, dude. And so he's telling me all the different places that he served when he was in the war. He's showing me his medals. And I mean, this dude is a legit war hero.
Wow.
And so I sat there. I ended up sitting there for probably 45 minutes just talking to him and, listening to his stories because I was fascinated by it, dude. It was a World War II guy. And so the World War II generation is just, they're a different.
They don't make them like
breed.
that anymore.
Oh, not at all, man. So I sat there and I listened to his story. My grandpa was in World War II, so it just reminded me a lot of that, and sat there and just heard him out. And at the end of that, he was just so appreciative just to talk to somebody. And it makes you, as a human being, you're just like, man, I'm just glad that like I could be there at that moment, because it's obviously what that guy needed, right? That he just needed somebody to talk to and to care about him in that moment. And so it was just a very cool moment for me.
That's really cool, man. Aren't those the best interactions when you actually get to take a moment on the job and get to know somebody, and they're so appreciative just to talk to somebody. You know what I mean? Right. They're so humble. I mean, that's really cool, man. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. Matt, one more for you. Right. It's a popular one. Advice to new officers. There's a lot of people in academy, people in backgrounds, people thinking about it, like they're on the fence. Should I do it or not? What would you say to the new officers coming in?
Shut your mouth and do what you're told.
It's not bad.
Totally kidding. You will have to do a little bit of that, but no. For the ones that are thinking about coming, please do, man. It's the greatest career ever. Don't believe the hype. The media and the narrative out there right now would have you believe that it's the career to get away from, but this is when we need people most. And I think people are called to this profession for a reason. It's a higher calling. And so we need you. We want you. And it's a very rewarding career. As I just told you, I mean, that story about the World War II vet, there are so many of those stories out there where you have an interaction with a person at the worst possible time of their lives, and you're able to make a difference in that. And it's very rewarding. And I know that our younger generation, dude, the generation that's getting out of high school, that's going into the workforce right now, comparatively to like my generation of cops when I got into it, they actually are more service-minded or oriented than I think we were back then. And statistically, that's been shown, just their mindset. And so I don't let the hype get you away from this career. Now, if you're in this career and you're a young guy, don't let it push you away, because we need you. Because I can tell you that I'm at the end of my career, and my job in this position is to support my people and to prepare my people to take my seat when I leave. I need good leaders, right? And no matter where you are in the ranks, you are some form of leadership. You're leading your family, you're leading in your community, and you could be leading in your agency. And so we need you to stay in the fight, because if not us, then who? Who's going to do it? And so to maintain what we have as a country, it is going to take strong policing. And so please, please, please stay in this fight with us, man, because we've got to have it to hold our country together.
Absolutely, man. I agree. And yeah, that's a real struggle we're having here is we're getting very young officers in, and we have admin people who are cemented in, but like the ones that are getting a little experience and the real, the cop that's done with the learning curve, they're hard to hold on to. And those are the ones that work. They're doing the work. They're not in learning mode, and they're not in admin mode. They're the backbone, and that's what we're having trouble with. We're hiring on like just new people all the time. That just, which is great, and which I love, and they're great people. But it's like, they say it's a 5-year learning curve for a cop. It's a very hard job to learn. So that it really hurts to lose people like after 5 years.
Yeah, I agree, and I think when they hit that 5 to 7 year mark, it's a weird phenomenon, because that's where they're starting to really learn, or not learn, but know their craft, and they're becoming good at what they do. But at the same time, it's also when you become very jaded and cynical, because you have a very myopic view, and you've been dealing with 5% of the population 100% of the time. And so when you hit that like 5 to 7 year mark, you start to have this view that the entire world is built with assholes and that
Right.
everybody is that. And so it's tough because you've hit a point where you're good at your job, you know your job, and you can do your job well. And at the same time, you feel like everything sucks because people suck. And so you've got this weird thing going on where you're being pulled in both directions. I'm good at this, but this sucks. And I think to get out of that trap, at least for me, what I had to do is back out of this career a little bit, and not get out of the career, but back out of it when I'm away from this career. So when
Yeah.
I'm away from work, and they tell you this, and it's very cliche, like have friends that aren't cops.
Right.
It's true. It's tough, and it's true. And the hardest part is just breaking away from this when you're away from work. And we don't help, right? And your admins don't help because you're sucked into overtime, or you're sucked into holding over, or you're
Right.
sucked into big cases, whatever. But I think in law enforcement that the tide is starting to turn and the pendulum is swinging back, to recognize that the police need to be allowed to run police operations. Let us do our job, let us function that way, but we're also recognizing that it's okay about not being okay. Like, it's okay to talk through the issues you're having. We're all having them. I had this same discussion this morning with the same rank as me at another sheriff's office, and he was telling me, man, I have this or that going, and I'm like, yep, I got the exact same things going on, man. That conversation would have never happened when I was a younger cop because it was taboo to talk about, hey, man, I heard this song and it made me emotional. Yeah, that's because I have 30 years of shit built up in my head that won't
Right.
go anywhere, and I'm on overload, and I need, some form of reprieve from that. And so I think, again, I kind of went off on a tangent there, but wrapping it all up is that those middle cops that we're losing, we have to make sure that we're taking better care of them, and that we are getting them to a place where they are better with their families, they're better with their own mental health and well-being, and removing them or allowing themselves to remove from the job a little bit more so that they're not sucked into that tug of war of everything sucks and I got to get out of here.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is the thing too, right? Your first 1 to 5 years, you're like, cop, cop, cop. And all your friends are cops, cop, cook, cop this. And it's like, yeah, you do kind of have to naturally take your foot off the accelerator with that and kind of, smell the roses. Like you said, just kind of
Right.
you need that for your mental health, just not to
Well, dude,
be.
and it helps so much because what you find out, because when you're around cops, you talk about cop shit, and then you talk about all the stuff that sucks. And so
Right.
when you break out of that world and you start talking to normal people, you realize that we're not very normal. Like, what we think is normal and what is actual normal is two different things. But I think it really helps with the perspective of everything sucking, because you realize that, hey, man, there's a lot of people that actually like us and like me and like what we stand for, and there's more than I thought. And so it
Right.
gives you just a different perspective. And I think that's what we lose. I think we lose hope, man. And that's what drives us away from this. You lose the hope that you're making a difference, and you have to get that hope back. And that's what helps is getting with good people outside of this profession.
Absolutely. Amen to that, brother. Interceptors, written by
Interceptor.
Matthew Thomas. Let's hear about it, brother.
So this was a concept in my head because I told a few stories, kind of like we've done here, right? You tell a few war stories, people are like, "Oh my God, you should write a book," and you're like, "Oh my God, that's a stupid idea." And so I went through all that, in my head, and finally, my sheriff actually was one of the biggest contributing factors. He's like, "Dude, you have got to do this, and you got to put pen to paper. These are historical things that you've done. It's good work that you've done, all that kind of stuff." And so I started doing that. So first, I started writing about some of the operations we did that were counter cartel operations, because our county, and if you read the book, you'll kind of see how it's all laid out. Our county is a key piece of real estate for the cartels. And so we had a lot of battles going back and forth with specifically the Sinaloa cartel. back in like the 08, 9, 10, 11 era,
Right.
is when these operations are from. So I wrote about those operations, and then as that was kind of the bulk of the book. And then I figured out as I was doing that, I'm like, well, people got to know like who I am and why I can speak to what I'm speaking to. So at the front end of the book, I kind of lay out, here's who I am, here's how I grew up, here's how I know what I know. And then I went into, here's how the cartels function, here's how they're structured, here's how they think, here's how they worship, here's how their culture looks. And I go into a bunch of that to lay the groundwork. So when you go into the operations at the end, you have a clear understanding of what's going on in those operations and everything. Some of the lingo makes sense. Some of what they're doing makes sense. Some of what we're doing makes sense. And then it just goes into the operations and kind of lines those out. And what you'll find is why those operations are different is because we never really put an actual number on it, but our best guess is less than 1% of law enforcement in the U.S. has ever done this type of work. And as a local law enforcement agency, really, there's not many at all, maybe a couple that have done this type of stuff.
Yeah.
And so they were very unique operations. They were they were more military type operations than law enforcement type operations. It kind of outlines those. And so that's it. So I wanted to memorialize all of that stuff and kind of lay it out and let people know. Again, it's so politicized, but I wanted people to know, like, here's behind the curtain. Here's what was actually going on. Here's the fight we actually have and how we had to deal with it. Because there's men and women out there every night doing stuff that the normal public has no idea about. And we're really holding it all together for this nation.
That sounds like a great book to educate people on that. Where should they catch it? Amazon, best place?
Yeah, Amazon. It's on Amazon, Kindle, Apple Books. Any of the book platforms, man, it's easy to find.
Very cool, man. Brother, it was an honor to have you on. Thank you for coming on the show, man. It was a blast. Do you have like 2 or 3 minutes to hang out? Or you got to get going.
Yeah, no, I'm good for a couple minutes.
All right, cool. Let me. I'll do the outro and I'll be back with you.
All right.
The great Chief Matthew Thomas, everybody. Man, I know this guy's got more stories, so we're gonna have to hook him up again. We're gonna have to bring him back, especially if he gets the second book going. Then I know he'll come back if he's got the second book going. Guys, thank you for joining us. Thank you for being here. This is a time in the show where I thank the Patreon sponsors, the sergeants on the Patreon, and who I'm talking about is the great Sarah Pomeroy, Andy Biggs, Greg Gadboy, Adam Mihal, the great Chris June, Gary Steiner, Jake Pinedo, the great John Shoemaker, Lauren Stimpson, the handsome Lane Campbell, Seth Wright, William James Ong, that's Deputy William James Ong to you, James Rose, the great Tony Fahey, Ben Peters, Braden Walker, Corey Payne, Jason Lau, the great Mike Wynn, Nathan Gowan, the great Sasha McNabb, Scott Minkler, the great Tammy Wall, Sean Clifford, Dennis, because that's all he put, Motor Cop Chronicles podcast, I'm talking about the Iceman, George Tessier, Nick New, Scott Young, the great Tom Connell, Wayne M. Miller, Burley Boards, that's Dan Carlson, ladies and gentlemen, Doug and Kelly Newman, love you guys, Joe DeVries, Dave Ellman, the great Elliot Sykes, Holly Vanover, Richard Tolles, there it goes, Brittany Sims, Christian, and Jace Crow. I love you guys. You guys keep the lights on. I so appreciate you and what you're doing for me. So thank you. And like I said before, that it will be a link in the show notes to get that. If you want to get a copy of Interceptor and hear more stories and see what it's like to work where Chief Thomas is working, you can do that. Also, I will put the link in the show notes and on the website so you guys can check that out. But that's all I got for you this week, guys. So without further ado, I'll see you next time.